rather than look at them separately, we're going to look at osmoregulation and thermoregulation together in the context of plants because they're actually continually intertwined and it's easier to see how they affect one another. You see, when an organism is trying to regulate its temperature, usually water is involved. So that's one of the main reasons why it actually works better when you look at these things together rather than separately. So this video is going to cover a few things. We're going to quickly revisit photosynthesis equation from previous terms. It's very simple what you're actually required to remember. You don't have to go into it in detail. We're going to look at how that relates to their different adaptations for getting the requirements for photosynthesis, which are gas, CO2 specifically, water, and light. Okay, the plant has adaptations to get all of those things, but a lot of the time getting those three components requires upsetting the balance of water or the balance of temperature in the plant. Then we're going to go specifically into those adaptations and how they are designed to regulate water and temperature balance. Okay, in a nutshell, there are two parts to photosynthesis. You can go back to previous lessons if you need to go into it in any more detail than that. Photosynthesis, of course, occurs in this chloroplast here, which inside the plant is a tiny, tiny little green spot. I'm just going to quickly go down to the next slide here. That little green thing here, that is what we're looking at, a chloroplast. It's in the middle of the leaf, it's green, it captures water and sunlight and CO2 and rams them together and makes sugar, essentially. So let's have a look. So here we have photosynthesis, light and independent reactions here. There's multiple reactions that actually go together to have this whole thing happen. First of all, the light-dependent reaction essentially uses water and light. They're the two things that happen in photosynthesis while the sun's occurring. And it is a recharge scenario. So basically, it uses the light, it takes its energy, and it uses it to recharge some battery molecules. Okay, now you've already learned in previous times that ATP is essentially a molecular battery, a rechargeable battery. It holds energy until we need it for other reactions. Well, so too is another molecule called NADPH. It is another molecular battery. Now, in its uncharged state, NADPH is NADP+, and in its uncharged state, ATP is ADP. Okay, so that light energy there is actually utilized and stored in those molecules, and they are recharged to make these two molecules to run chemical reactions. How does it do it? Well, the light energy is actually used to split water into oxygen, and it takes the hydrogen ions that are left over and electrons from the water and then uses it through a whole series of little reactions to recharge those two molecules. That's what it does. That's all that you need light for, is actually to recharge your rechargeable batteries in your cell. Then the cell actually uses those two molecules to make sugar. So it has something that's called the Calvin cycle. Now this is a light independent reaction, which essentially means it happens 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter if sunlight is on or not. It simply takes the ATP and the NADPH and it uses them to make sugar. Okay, it uses them and essentially discharges them and takes the CO2 several times over because it takes quite a lot of CO2s to make a sugar, puts them into this Calvin cycle and spits sugar out at the end, and in doing so it discharges the NADPH and the ATP molecules. And that's essentially what photosynthesis is. Okay, I'm not going to go into it in any more detail than that. That's as far as I want you to go for now. Now, let's relate that to now the plant's structure. So it needs gas for photosynthesis, CO2, it needs water, and it needs light. Okay? They're the three things that it needs to have photosynthesis happen. Now for the light-dependent reaction, that means that in the daytime, the priority, because that's when the light is there, The priority is to make sure that there's enough water so that it can be split and used to recharge the cell batteries while light is available. It doesn't always need CO2. Some plants will actually pull in CO2 in the daytime as well. That's fine, but it doesn't essentially need to do it then, because it actually can run that reaction through the night if it had to. The only thing it needs to do in the daytime is recharge its cell batteries, and that actually relates to an awful lot of the adaptations we see in plants. Okay, so let's have a look. First of all, to get the CO2 into the leaf, it actually uses, I'm going to use a different color for this. Here's my CO2 here. To get him into the leaf, it actually comes in the gas form. Okay, CO2 comes in as a gas, and because of that, it has to enter the leaf through an air space here called a stoma or a stomata. Essentially, that's a hole in the leaf so that gas can get in. It's made from something called guard cells, which essentially open and close to let stuff in. They look like this. So here's my guard cells. They look like that. They will either open or close, and you'll see that a little bit later in this video. And when they're open, gas can get in, which means it can get in here to where it's needed for photosynthesis. Now, the other thing it needs is water. Here's my water here. Water does not come in through the stoma. However, it can get out. Okay, once that's open, you actually have a lot of gaseous water up in here. When they are open, CO2 can get in, but water can get straight back out again as well. So it's actually a fantastic way for the leaf to lose water. Okay, when water actually gets sucked out of the leaf like that, we call that transpiration, which is fine as long as you can afford to lose the water. And if you can't afford to lose the water, then it's not such a good thing. Water actually gets up to the leaf through the internal circulatory system of the plant. We have learned earlier that the plant itself, so this is a tree, has an internal circulatory system of things that go up and down, little tubes that it puts together. The one that goes up to the leaf and carries water from the roots is called a xylem, and the one that goes down towards the roots carrying the sugar is called the phloem. We're going to stick to the xylem for now. So those xylem are tiny little tubes that literally run up to every leaf, and here they are here. Now, as long as there's water available in the ground, the xylem are continually pulling water up to the leaves in a continuous flow of what we call transpiration. That's the movement of water from the roots all the way up to the leaves, and eventually it will escape out of the stomata. Now, the last thing we need is light. Light has to get into the leaf too, and again, remember, it's got to get into these tiny little chloroplasts here. To get to them, the light actually has to come down onto the leaf, get through this waxy cuticle that's on top of the leaf protecting it, get through the epidermal cells that are on top of the leaf protecting it, and make its way into these mesophyll cells in the middle of the leaf and hit a chloroplast. That's how light gets into the leaf. It's actually got to literally dive through the leaf and be absorbed. Now, that's how you get all of your three components for photosynthesis into the leaf, into the chloroplast for the reaction to go ahead. Now, how you get, which of those components you get in and how much is really what the adaptations are all about.